Welcome to the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Brenda. And this is a podcast where we highlight educators who innovate, engage, and inspire through the use of technology. So today on the MyTech Toolbelt podcast, we are so excited to share with you a unique episode. While Shannon and I were at the Q conference, we had the opportunity to speak with Craig Jones, the co-founder of Formative. Craig talks to us about his journey of starting as a classroom teacher to developing the assessment tool named Formative. But first, we'll be talking to Danielle Moore. So Danielle is a junior high school Spanish and social studies teacher from Chicago, Illinois. She tells us about how Formative has transformed her assessment process in her classroom and is making grading fun again. So without further ado, here's Danielle.
Welcome, Danielle Moore, to the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. You're going to be talking to us today about Formative, which was also known as Go Formative. You are a classroom teacher, 7th and 8th grade. Will you tell us a little bit about
what got me into teaching? I wanted to be a physical therapist, and I have no idea why. So I started on that track first, and then I realized I had no idea why I wanted to do that. And then I was always taking Spanish classes. So my mom's like, you should teach Spanish because you're so fun. And I'm like, okay. I started meeting people who were also teaching Spanish. And then I realized that that was really the one thing that I always loved in school. So then I went into secondary ed at Depaul University in Chicago. And then I studied abroad in Madrid. And then, So basically I just kept falling in love with the language and then started learning about education and having a blast with that. And 10 years later, I am teaching 7th grade Spanish, 8th grade Spanish, and social studies as well.
So you're teaching in Evanston?
Correct. The demographic of my school is predominantly African American and Hispanic, and I guess the rest would be Caucasian. Okay. And then there's also, which I love, on the North Shore of Chicago, there's a large Jewish population, which is great to learn about. We have a lot of multiculturalism.
So at your school, how is the special populations handled? Are they push in or pull out or self-contained?
So we have co-taught classrooms, we have some push-ins, and then we also have self-contained classrooms.
Do you have any special population students in your class?
I have in my social studies classrooms, I do have some students who push in with a teaching assistant.
Danielle, tell us a little bit about what technology your school currently has.
So right now, we are one-to-one with iPads.
Okay, good. So all your students have access to those?
Every student has an iPad that they are responsible for, and they can take home each night.
That's really powerful, because when students don't have access at home, it makes the learning much more difficult at school.
But there's also still a problem with equity with Wi-Fi at home. That's why I try to flip a lot of my lessons, and I try to keep everything in class just because there are a few students who don't have access at home.
So I'm just learning more. I was at Q Bold last weekend, and I was learning more about just initiatives at the federal level of whose parents meet a certain threshold can get $4 or $9 a month internet. So that I'm going to look more into that and probably talk a little bit more about that as soon as I know enough about it to speak intelligently on it. But I thought that was really for those kind of students. Oftentimes they meet the requirements to get the internet delivered at a very low cost in certain situations. So I'm very curious to see what that looks like and how we can publicize that a little more, because I don't think people know about that as much.
I've heard of that as well. And then I'm still it makes me sad that even the $4 is too expensive for some families. So I think it's a great starting point, but you just never know what the circumstances are with all of your kids at home.
And some of them, they don't want to fill out the paperwork to do things like that. It's uncomfortable, and that's challenging too, because they could get it and they probably could afford it, but then they don't want to let anybody know that where they are on the scale. So it's a challenge for sure. Brenda, do you have any questions?
What made you first even look at Formative?
So about 3 years ago at my last school, we went one-to-one with Chromebooks, and I had no idea about anything other than Google Docs, Google Classroom, and Google Forms. So our tech coordinator had everyone sign up for Twitter at an after-school ed camp. So I was just following some accounts and just seeing people mention things. And then I saw Formative and I was like, I'm going to do this tomorrow. This is so cool. So I looked at it and I threw some questions on there, and then I'm like, I'm just going to play around with this for a day and see like what I can get out of it. And that's when I fell in love with Formative, because it totally changed the way that I was assessing my students within like 24 hours of trying the tool.
Wow.
It's an amazing tool. I've been in love with Formative for a really long time, and I only use the free version. The paid version has so much more data and analytics that you can get out of it. I mean, it has so many more features. For those people who don't know what Formative is, what would they be using it for, and what does it do?
Okay, so GoFormative is an formative assessment tool, and you can set up different types of questions to get feedback from your students when it's most important. So that instant feedback to every student in your class at a very, very efficient rate. So, for example, you can have short answer questions, you can have true and false, you can embed video, you can have a canvas where they're showing their work, and then you will have screens where you're seeing everyone's responses in real time. And then that can drive your discussion and lead to how you are going to drive your instruction in the future, or even within the same class period.
So they can be doing GoFormative. It's quick formative assessment, or it could be non-quick formative assessment. It could
ongoing.
Be something it could be ongoing. Yeah. You could assign it for homework or
so the best thing is like I use it very non-traditionally. So you can make it whatever it really will work for you. Whatever you want to do with it, you pretty much can do. But I think when most people think of it, it's like the in-class quick feedback. But if you wanted to make it like a long form assignment, you certainly could as well.
One of the things that I loved and was kind of my hook for some teachers, I was always challenged with teachers who had the ditto, the worksheet that they just ran off every year, and that was their test. And so it was the same test every year. And there was actually a situation where we had a teacher at one of the schools I was working with who literally had the same test for 30 years. So the parent had taken the test, and now the kid was taking the same test, literally the exact same test. So when I found out about Formative, I actually asked the teacher if I could scan the document in, and then that actually became a fillable formative assessment tool that the students could do online. And it was, the kids loved it. It was really engaging. It was still the same test. So, mm-hmm. I mean, baby steps, but at the end of the day, we were able to put it in a digital format, and we were able to kind of move the teacher kind of into that way of collecting data digitally. And so that's, I think, one of the coolest features is that you can take a PDF or I believe a Word document as well, some kind of a scanned document. And then you can, so if you've already got something that exists, you're not recreating the wheel basically. And then they also have a bank, right? Like a bank of assessments that are already built, like a library.
They do. They have a library full of assessments that you can use as well.
And tweak and customize and make your own. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you were able to turnkey it in 24 hours. You saw it, you were like, this looks cool. You did a little research at home, and then the next day you were using it in class. Tell us a little bit about, just a little more detail for our listeners about what that looked like for you.
I really think that I just took like an exit slip and put my questions on the Formative, and then just did it at the beginning of class so I could like troubleshoot anything that came my way. So it had to be Spanish. I think I was using it sort of like a DOL.
Okay.
So working on grammar, and I put some sample sentences to see like if they could catch like, are there accents missing, or can they respond to this question? And then for each one, I projected everyone's results on the screen without their names, just so we could see like what were the most common missed questions. And then we had a discussion about it. And that was my first really rough lesson.
And how did your kids respond to that? How did your students respond to that?
They really liked it because it was anonymous, so no one was being put on the spot, but then they were also getting that feedback that they needed. And then it was on their Chromebooks, which they loved because they didn't have to write anything. it kind of took away the need to do like a long worksheet because we were doing things in real time.
And so do you use this with both Spanish and your social studies classes?
I do, but I think I use them kind of differently for each subject.
So tell us about that.
So what I like to do for social studies is, because formative is so versatile, you can do what are kind of like playlists. So you can upload like a video. You could put some questions in to gauge understanding. You can embed a Flipgrid for a discussion. What I've done before is put a today's meet, in, which is going away, which is so sad.
So sad.
But really, like, to start a social studies class with like a question, like what was the Mexican-American War? And then see what kids know, and then embed a background video, and then give them some articles, some primary sources to read, and have them answer some questions, and then have a discussion. You can put all of that into Go Formative, and then you have an entire flipped lesson for your kids. So everyone's working at their own pace.
That's fascinating to me, because you could actually take a Go Formative and modify it a couple of times for students at different levels as well. So you could kind of start with the same block, and if you knew that your kids needed different information based on the same subject area, you could actually group them, right? By these kids are going to go watch this playlist on the Mexican-American War, and then these kids are going to go watch this playlist. You could really customize it if you wanted to.
Yeah.
For the most part, you have yours going through like whole group.
I try to have it go through whole group. I know that for some of my students in my social studies class, because the levels are so varied, that I have some students who are working on maybe writing, and we're working on like reasoning and arguments and justification, whereas some kids need to work on main ideas and some things that are a little more simple. If I'm doing something introductory, it would be whole group. But then as we move deeper into the content, it will become more personalized.
What was the learning curve for your students when you started using this? Are they basically just answering the questions? And
they're answering questions. It's just such a elegant interface that it's not really too complicated. From what I remember, there were no speed bumps at all.
You've been using this for about 3 years now, over the course of a couple different schools, you would say. It's definitely increased your student engagement, I would imagine, or impacted student engagement. They probably like doing this much more than they like a worksheet. But I'm curious as to how this helped you as a teacher. How did it change? You said it changed your practice. Can you just tell us like how it impacted your workflow?
So I think when I started teaching, I really loved, and I don't know why, I really loved grading a lot. And now I cannot stand grading long assignments that are like, no, I don't like grading long assignments at all. So especially if they're repetitive. And I know that students don't like to do that type of work either. So if you're using something like Formative, and you can really vary the questions and really get to see what students know or see what they need to know, and if you can intervene and kind of help them out like in the moment, then you're not going to need for them to go home and do hours of homework. So I think my biggest thing right now is feedback. Like, how can I give as much feedback as possible during this class period that'll be more beneficial than any homework assignment I could send home with a student? So my goal is to check in with each student every day and give every student feedback within the class period every single day.
I think that's an amazing and a wonderful philosophy that I hope that your administration appreciates, because I really think that's meeting the needs of the students. You know, for those of us who aren't big fans of homework, and continue to repeat over and over again that there is no study that shows that homework does anybody any good.
And it's just not beneficial for me to take a worksheet and grade it and then hand it back and have a student recycle it.
Right.
Or have me take home 6 classes of grading and then not do it because I'm tired. Right. So I'd rather I have my energy during the day, during class. I'm going to give it all to you, and then we'll come back the next day.
Do it.
All of me right now, instead of me putting in, effort grading a 30-question worksheet, which you're not going to look at the feedback on.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Having had, 2 kids kind of go through those grades already, I know that the feedback is very rarely looked at. And I think there's a way to give meaningful feedback, and then there's a way that's just, they're not responsive to it. So you've shared a Spanish lesson with us and our listeners. So there'll be a link to it on the website, and you also shared the rubric. Would you kind of walk us through that lesson and how you use what your lesson is, just kind of overview, and then how you use Formative to make that lesson more impactful?
Sure. So with my 7th grade Spanish 1, we were learning about La Tomatina, which is a festival in Spain where they throw tomatoes. So this is a cultural lesson. It's not all in Spanish because it was at the very beginning of the year, but the culture is still very important. So I set up a playlist for my students on Formative. So we did a reading together in class from our textbook, and then I gave them a video with some background about La Tomatina, and they had to watch the video. They had to answer some questions about it as well. And then there was a Flipgrid that I embedded for them to discuss whether or not they would go to the festival and why, and what they thought about it. And then they also had to compare La Tomatina to any festivals in the United States. Oh, and the video I embedded was an Edpuzzle. So there were questions embedded throughout the video to check for understanding.
So you were essentially getting feedback from Edpuzzle, and you're also getting feedback from Go Formative, and then you're also getting feedback from Flipgrid. So you're essentially app smashing.
Yes.
I mean, in a way, you're using and the textbook, which is not giving you feedback, but it's definitely a resource. So you have these 3 apps that you're using that are giving you all of this data, which allows you to kind of just really quickly, no matter where you are in whichever app you're in, see who's mastering what and seeing if that's consistent through each application. That's genius. That's absolutely genius.
During this day, the kids are all working independently, and I'm just checking in through the various channels. So everyone's working at their own pace, and it's just a very seamless way to deliver a lesson.
Would this be something that took one class period? 60
this
minutes?
Took a 45-minute class period.
A 45-minute class period, okay.
So when you say you're checking in, how do you check in?
So on Formative, on the dashboard, I would get to see all of their responses on one screen. But with the app smashing, I also got to watch their Flipgrid videos on Flipgrid, which was embedded in the Formative.
I'm very, very, very into app smashing. So I like when we take, one tool and just totally blow it out of the water using other tools. And I think the fact that you're putting playlists in is really, really unique, because I've never heard of anybody doing that before. So I think that just the fact that you were able to think outside the box in that capacity is amazing. Your school has some special populations. How has Formative impacted the teaching and the learning for those students? Especially like in your social studies class, you have some students that push in.
It really allows you to get the feedback and then differentiate quicker, which is always a plus. I like that when we are working whole group and then we're having a discussion about the questions that we've asked or things that they've responded to in Formative, when we put them all up anonymously and have a discussion, I think that students from special populations can see that students that are Gen Ed might be thinking the same things as them. And I think that brings your classroom culture together. That brings your community together.
So do you think that Formative would work in a homeschool environment?
I think it would be beneficial. Even if you're just putting together some resources all in one place, I think that would be a great thing to do. I think that maybe if you set up a Formative and had the student respond to something, and then if you cloned it or made a copy of it and then gave the same thing, you could see like kind of like a pre-assessment, post-assessment, and see what was learned. So I think it would be beneficial.
Excellent. And so because this is a web app, it really works on like iPads, Chromebooks, any computer, any device you have. For the iPads, I know it does work better. The fill-in and the writing component, show your work component, does work better on the iPads because of they can draw with their fingers or a stylus or the pencil. It's a little harder on a Chromebook. Excellent.
And the cost again is?
There is a free version, and then there is a premium version. But if you would like to try it, you can use my code DMORESPANISH for 45 days of premium.
Yes, and we will have. So thank you for that promo code. We'll have that promo code posted on our in our show notes and on our website.
So it's D like dog, more MOORE, Spanish SPANISH. And
I can tell you that the premium version is $12 a month if you sign up for a build yearly, and $15 a month if you go month to month. And it looks like they also have like school pricing models as well. But the difference, I mean, there's a huge opportunity in the paid version. What I can tell you is that the free version gives you unlimited assignment and assessment to teach using the live student responses, and then the data that comes out of that. So the returning the scores and being able to give feedback.
And I know some people get really upset about paying for things, which I do too. And people have criticized me before for using things that aren't free, but I use the free version of Go Formative, and I've been using it for years, and I absolutely love it. And it's so valuable for students. So if you don't have a lot of money, I recommend using it, and you could totally get whatever you want out of it without paying anything.
Yeah, I think a lot of I think Go Formative is a tool that using it in the free version is, unlimited assignments and assessments. So it's not like, so it's a freemium. So you're definitely not getting advanced questions. You're not getting anti-cheating and analytics algorithms is what I meant. You're not getting emojis built in. So there's 25 pages at a time, unlimited PDF document upload. So there's a lot of stuff that comes if you were really going all in, as you're using it in all 6 of the classes you teach. The paid version,
definitely,
most definitely.
And I would definitely try to use my budget money to pay for it.
Your school budget money.
Yes, my school budget money in the future.
Because I know some schools do give a dollar amount per teacher depending on the district. So you could allocate some of that funds, maybe not 100% of it, but you might be able to allocate some of those funds to cover that cost. But you can try it for 45 days. Your promo code is better than the promo code that's on the internet right now, which is only try for 30 days. So you're going to get an extra 15 days.
So what type of teachers do you think would benefit most from using this?
I think math, because of the show your work option. And I would say foreign language and language arts as well would be the most. They would benefit a lot from Go Formative.
And I like the fact that you're using it in social studies, because I think social studies is typically a class where, I don't want to say it's overlooked, but it's often overlooked, right? Like we have and it really incorporates a lot of the English language arts standards in with it. It sounds like you're doing a lot of that work, bringing the literature component in there. But it really also has a magic of social studies could be so fruitful when you put primary resources in and allow them to do virtual field trips and things like that. So when you started talking about your playlist, that's where my head went is, oh my gosh, I could start embedding, the Library of Congress resources, and I could start embedding virtual field trips from those, like when you're talking about the Mexican-American War, like where did that take place? And there's historical documents in there that could be turned into 360. So that's kind of, those are the things that I think could spice up history and social studies, where I just think of my history and social studies class. I don't think any of my history and social studies teachers are listening to this podcast. So I'm going to very safely and confidently say, like, it was all direct instruction. It was notebook checks every day to see if I took notes on all of the stuff that they spewed at me on a regular basis. And then there was a regurgitation test at the end.
That's exactly what my classes were like. And I loved it. I loved everything about taking notes and taking huge tests. But my kids do not learn like that. So
some kids do. I do have a child of mine that does learn very well in that type of environment. And therefore you're still giving them that. You're still giving them information. But I have another child personally and who would tell you the whole story. In fact, he told me the story the other day at breakfast about the Mexican-American War. So it's funny you're doing that because he's only in 4th grade. And it was the one that was happening here in California during this tumultuous time. And he told me everything from so-and-so was a bad guy and he got put in jail and this guy's dad died. I mean, he could tell the whole story. And so that made me think that there was not a lot of direct instruction. It was a storytelling event that happened. And he was obviously very engaged because he could retell the story. Now I'm thinking, please God, let them give the test in a way where it's not a bubbled test, where he can tell that story because, I was looking at his notes and I would say, oh, tell me about this guy. And he was like, oh my gosh, this guy, Mom, he was a so-and-so. So I feel like history is just such an amazing story to tell. And that's how you engage kids with the literature component of it, right? Because it is a story. Yeah, no, that was a great question, Brenda. Our listeners know way too much about my children.
I had a student who was just like that, actually. We were doing the Constitution and I would try to give them multiple choice questions like it would be on the test, and he would not do any of them. So one day I sat him down. I'm like, you're really opinionated. You should run for Congress. And he's like, I want to be a representative. I have so many laws that I want to make, put into action. I'm like, okay, so how old do you have to be to run for the House? And he's like, 25. He's like, but when I do it, so he knew everything that I had taught him. He just wouldn't do a multiple choice. So history and social studies is all about how you're getting them the information.
And then rethink about how we test, right? He could have used a Flipgrid to tell you the story.
Yeah. And
you could have said, tell me a story that meets all of these expectations. Just like you said, how old do you have to be to do this? How old do you have to be? And then they'll tell you. I mean, I think that's just if they don't, not every kid does well with a standardized summative assessment. And so that's what I love about Go Formative, because I really feel like it allows us to meet the needs of students in alternative ways. Some kids definitely respond well to that traditional testing model. I just worry about retention too.
Yeah.
In some of those traditional standardized testing models. Well, thank you, Danielle. We really appreciate your time. How can our listeners get a hold of you if they want to follow you on Twitter? What's your Twitter?
At Twitter, I am DMore Spanish.
Just like your promo code.
Just like my promo code.
Well, thank you so much again for your time today and talking about Formative. It's a great tool. Formative.
It's one
Go
of my
Formative.
go-tos. It's a staple for me.
And on the internet, you can find it at GoFormative.com.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you,
Danielle. So next up is our interview with Craig Jones, the co-founder of Formative. Shanna was able to interview him at the Q conference a couple of months ago, so you may hear a little bit of buzz from the vendor floor. Even if you are familiar with the program named Formative and perhaps haven't looked at it in a while, Craig tells you why you need to take another look. So without further ado, here's Craig.
So, Shannon Spaldo, I'm with My Tech Toolbelt podcast, and we're here at Q 2018 Palm Springs, California, with Craig Jones, the founder of Formative. Thanks for talking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Formative is a tool that I use. I love it. I was telling you just a few minutes ago, that's one of my favorite assessment tools that are digital. Will you tell us a little bit about Formative itself, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, so Formative, otherwise known as Go Formative. GoFormative.com is a freemium teacher kind of platform to see classroom data. We do that in two pretty amazing ways. The first is a live student response system. And when we say live, we really mean live. So you build these digital assignments, assessments, do nows, exit tickets, classwork, homework, anything that you want to see data on. You send them to your students, and that can be via Google Classroom or with a quick code or little link. And then you just watch their live answers pour in. And so if they're answering a drawing question, you're going to see live drawing strokes come through. If they're answering an essay or a type question, you're going to watch the responses type through like a Google Doc. But you see one view that has about 20 or 30 boxes with live activity going on, which represent each of those students' live classwork. And then you can grade and give feedback or project that on the wall and hide student names if you like to keep them anonymous. You can see trends in which questions students are falling behind on, or let students work at their own pace and maybe evaluate the work later. So that's kind of the first half of what we do. And we've made that remarkably easy and simple so any teacher can be data-driven. We also just released a library with a whole bunch of pre-made formative assessments, over 1,000 now, so that it's just plug and play and completely effortless to use your first digital formative assessment at GoFormative.com. But the second thing we do, which I think is maybe my favorite part personally, is that we not only let you see those live student answers kind of aggregate through, but we take each of your daily formative assessments and add them to a student growth tracker that's standards-based. And so if you're tagging Common Core standards or Next Generation Science standards or any standard set, because we have hundreds of them, to your formative items, then without doing any extra work, we show you which standards over the course of weeks of time your students are mastering or maybe falling behind on, and make it really easy to dive in and look at student growth towards those standards. And so that standards-based growth tracker is really the second core part of our product. And then we do a whole bunch of other things like transforming documents, which a lot of people love, making PDFs or Word documents digital and interactive.
That's one of my favorite features, by the way.
Yeah, that's actually what got us on the map, believe it or not. Just a need that a lot of people wanted to go digital, but weren't quite in a place where they were ready.
They didn't know how to take that worksheet that they had that test that they had for 20 years in a file cabinet where they just made 30 Xerox copies of it and then said, fill this out. They didn't know how to take that and digitize it. And it was too much effort for them to do it. And honestly, that's how I started promoting your product when I was out in the field doing professional development was, okay, well, I can just scan it literally with my phone and upload it just as easy. And it was like mind blowing. And for me, and I think for a lot of teachers, I think that you're right. I think that's what put you guys on the map. And what you've done with it is taken it to a whole nother level. So you've actually made it easy for us teachers to do standards-based grading because you're showing that standards growth chart within these. As long as you're mapping properly, you can actually see where kids are mastering and not mastering yet. So that's fantastic. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you like it. And another little plug just for those who are curious about what we've really been working on recently. Besides the library, we've really been focused on allowing teams of teachers to collaborate and build common assessments together, and then either distribute those assessments or edit them together or potentially view the results in a way that a team or PLC or department or school really can see student growth as a whole.
That's so great. So that comes with the paid version. Obviously, that's a paid version feature.
Yeah, we have 3 versions of the app. There's a free version, which we like to think our free version is better than everybody else's premium version.
I agree.
We have a premium version, which adds about 10 features at the moment. We try to add another one every month. That includes like advanced question types like audio response, drag and drop categorization, resequence, graphing question type. We're adding a numeric question type for students to be able to type math equations really effortlessly. And on top of that, there's a whole bunch of features like the unlimited student growth tracker. And the list goes on. If you're interested, you can go to GoFormative.com/pricing and see all the different features there. But our third category is our team or school category. And we really try to pride ourselves on making it so that instead of an individual teacher having success, which we know we do a really good job of that, we amplify a teacher and make them do exceptionally well in their classroom. We want to make it so that success can be shared at an entire school or department level. And making our tool very collaborative allows that one teacher's success to be able to be shared with 5 other teachers or so.
So great. So great. Tell us a little bit about how you started GoFormative. What was your journey in this process?
So I was an 8th grade science teacher in South Los Angeles, in Southgate Middle School and had no intention of ever starting a technology company. Was very happy teaching my 160 students every day, but I will say it was really difficult to teach those 160 students every day. So I was using Google Forms and a clicker system pretty religiously, where instead of having any cart that I was lugging back and forth from school to grade things, I just tried to make students kind of complete their assignments in a digital fashion. And then I was kind of that spreadsheet geek who, as long as I was making each day standards-based, then I would plug in the data from that day, whether it be the clicker results or the Google Forms results, into that standards-based tracker, that early prototype. And then my whole kind of mindset was, well, throughout the week, we're going to notice which students are falling behind on which standards and which students are excelling on those standards. And then we'll do daily or after-school tutoring sessions to pair the students who are falling behind with the students who are mastering, and then do a remediation where they would kind of work together and progress through something that was standards aligned that maybe had like 30 to 60 questions that grew in difficulty. And so you would have these students working together, but it was a very targeted intervention because I knew these are the students who struggled and these are the students who mastered this standard. If they work together and they can progress through this, I feel fairly confident that they now understand the standard. And none of that was possible without actually thinking about data in my classroom and not just assuming that I knew which students actually understood concepts, but really recording it, let the data do the talking. And that kind of was my goal, and I was happy, and the results were there. We had 99th percentile academic growth.
Wow, that's fantastic.
We were probably the number one little bubble in Southgate. I'm sure LAUSD noticed that. I think at the end of the day, I was very proud because the students that I taught, their math scores were only 14% proficient or advanced.
Wow.
And this is back when proficiency and advanced was a thing, but in science, we were 86% proficient advanced. In 8th grade, math and science are pretty interconnected.
Right.
So I almost felt, well, I was proud, but also horrified because I knew that we were doing something really strong, but why couldn't the math teacher have similar success? And what could I do to transform that? But at the time, I really wasn't thinking that way. I was just happy with my own environment. However, I got displaced due to seniority at the end of my 4th year. Just kind of a little bit of a wake-up call on what am I going to do? And I ended up going to UCLA and got a master's degree there. And while I was there, I entered into a competition. And at the time, I thought I was going to start a school, but they ended up liking the software more. And lo and behold, I met a co-founder who was my roommate, and Formative went from just like a classroom idea or, I don't know, into a tech company. And recently, I've really, I'm not an English teacher, dove into coding directly. So I do a large amount of the programming for GoFormative.com, and that's a personal passion of mine as well. So
that's great. I love that story. And you were Teach for America, so we'll get a shout out.
I don't know if everybody loves Teach for America, but I was
Teach
TFA.
for America. Yeah, TFA.
I promise I would have stayed in my classroom if I could have, but
I think that's, but I think it's great what you've done because if you would have stayed in your classroom, you wouldn't have impacted as many people as you can impact now. And student success is definitely, I mean, how many students do you estimate you've got using this platform?
So that's a good question. We don't require every student to log in. You can be a guest on Formative, which kind of can make the numbers go up or down.
How about teachers? How many?
I can still answer roughly how many students. When I taught, I had about 160 students in my classroom. Last year, roughly, we think we had about 1.6 million students.
That's fantastic.
So it's kind of nice.
That's fantastic.
Couple 100x or whatever growth there. But in terms of teachers, we've had now over 6% of teachers in the United States create accounts.
Okay.
Which is a really big success because we do no marketing. It's all word of mouth. I guess we give some t-shirts or stickers if you're interested, but that's about as far as we go on the marketing side. Q is actually our first conference we've ever had a booth. It's not really our style, but to have a booth, but we had people who asked to meet us here, so we figured we'd do it. On top of that, in terms of, I guess, student growth or usage now, for us, it's really about now activating those teachers because it's one thing to sign up, but it's another to use it in your classroom.
Right.
And we found that if you use it in your classroom just one time, you're 80% likely to keep using it. But what do we have to do to help teachers just try it once. And we found the library has been really successful because there's a lot of inspirational content that's already ready to go. And we've also found a whole bunch of other little kind of secrets in terms of helping teachers get across the fear that this might be tricky or hard and realize how simple it is to do this data-based instruction.
What I do when I introduce formative in either my classroom setting or when I do professional development is I actually I give them time to set up an account and either input one of their current assessments. We're doing usually a workshop on assessment. So I'm like, bring an assessment with you. And usually it's either paper or digital. And either way, we can get it right in. So I like to think I'm helping you get them through that first hurdle. I think one of the other things you said was really critical in the library when teachers have kind of a resource where they can be like, I know I'm teaching third grade fractions where, and I'm meeting these standards. I have that opportunity to, I grab this assessment, I can tweak it. Those are editable assessments. Once you've put them into your own instance, you can, I don't like this question, I'm going to remove it or whatever. I think that's really powerful because the teachers want to have their own ownership of that material as well. So good job on that. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us that's new and exciting about the new features or something on the product?
Well, I think the biggest request I would have is if anybody wants to do a free pilot or demo, that they can contact us at team@goformative.com, and then we can really just set you up and make it so that you have access to the premium features if that's what you're interested in. Really do anything we can to help you use it, because we know if you use it, you're going to fall in love with it. We've also had a lot of success here at Q in particular with schools or districts that have common assessment goals. And sometimes that's as simple as we use Engage New York or Eureka Math, and we want to see insights into whether or not that's leading to student growth. Or we're trying to do some benchmarks, but we really want our teachers to do more formative assessment. And maybe we can start by digitizing our benchmarks and looking at the data there, but then really kind of focus on doing more daily or weekly common assessment. I think that's kind of the theme of our future.
Okay.
At Formative is really helping not just individual teachers succeed, but teams, departments, districts, or just school level see that student growth. So I guess that's the only plug I have in terms of things to look out for. We update a feature every single week. So if you haven't seen Formative since January, you've probably missed out on a ton.
Okay.
If you haven't seen it since last school year, it probably looks totally different from you. And we're very, very, very proactive with teacher feedback. So if anybody has comments, there's a little question mark in the bottom right corner of the app that you can leave to us, and I promise you that's how we determine what to build next. And if you are a premium or partner school, then we have a fast track to get those features out there. So I think we do a pretty good job of that. We're a teacher-based team. More than half of our team was former teachers or assistant principals of that sort. And so hopefully you just feel like you can tell us what you think and work with us.
Excellent. Thank you. How do our teachers, they follow you on Twitter?
So at GoFormative is definitely our main Twitter account where you'd get all the sneak peeks, the insider information. The neat thing with the Twitter group is, well, we do a weekly Twitter chat on Mondays, and we just have a lot of genuine content. I don't think you're going to feel like you're following some company. You're going to feel like you're following somebody who really cares about student growth and formative teaching. But the other place that I'd recommend is if anyone goes to discuss.goformative.com, we have a certification program for people who might be interested in really being the lead teacher or just learning more about formative in particular. And we have a multi-tiered certification program. And so if you go to discuss.goformative.com, you'll see all the details. But basically, you can unlock key badges and become kind of an elite formative teacher. And that's been really exciting. And those people actually get to beta test features and do all kinds of fun stuff.
That's good. Well, we're going to reach out to some of those leaders and to do some promoting for you. Excellent. And what is the hashtag for your Twitter chat?
So formative chat. Hashtag formative chat.
Okay, perfect. We'll put all of that in our show notes and on our website for you.
Awesome.
Thank you for your time today. It was really great talking with you.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. And please, if you have enjoyed listening, please tell someone else about the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, and also on Spotify. We appreciate all your comments. Thank you. And we're out.